Shalom, my name is Mikey Pauker, and I'm here with you, the BlackNorth Ignites. I am honored to join you as a member of the Jewish community. I'm a touring Jewish musician based out of Fairfax, California, but right now I'm in a town called Williams in a cabin in the woods at the Good Medicine Gathering. There is a blessing we say in the morning liturgy and evening liturgy, Oseh Shalom Imramav, Huya Aseh Shalom Aleinu V'Kol Yisrael V'Kol Yoshvei Tel V'Imru Amen. It's a prayer for peace. We say, Great Spirit, the one who makes peace, make peace for Yisrael and all nations. And how do we access peace in these days? And I often ask myself that. What I've learned is that by sharing of the heart and sharing of our authenticity and our vulnerability breaks down the walls of division. And when we can share the real narratives of what we're facing, we can transform the darkness into light. I've seen it happen in real time. And in the video that you're going to watch, it was a documentary. We went out to the streets of Oakland a few years ago, and I held up a sign, and on the sign it says, I'm in a dark place, and I'm afraid you're going to judge me if you know how I feel. And as I held up that sign, people walked by and they saw that as well, and they said, me too. And there were many other narratives that were expressed that day. And I saw in that very moment lives transformed by seeing that we are all reflections of each other. Just like the stars in the sky, we are reflections of that same very light that exists inside of every single one of us. And we access that. We can access that from vulnerability, from authenticity, from sharing of the heart. That is the peace that will come. And so my prayer is that we will all have the time in our lives when we pray for peace. The way we get that is opening the heart, sharing the narratives, the vulnerable stories that we hold back. And through that, my friends, that's how we heal the world. Take care, everyone. I'm Mikey Pauker, and enjoy the video.
If you were to make a sign about something about yourself that you would normally want to hide, what would it say?
I'm afraid I'm not doing what else can say. Enough with my suffering.
Compassionate eyes can rip your soul from your seas. As people lie down with no water to drink. This is a crazy taste of reality, and all love dies, all love breathes, all love dies, all love breathes.
There was a lot up there. I didn't get it. I short lived my own life.
We gotta rise up, oh, we gotta stand up tall. Don't let this world lock you out of your soul. We gotta rise up, oh, we gotta stand up tall. Don't let this world lock you out of your soul. Hey.
I've been in a dark place too.
Open your eyes to the sight. A million blessings disguising their light. The darkness in the world is real. Have right action, stand on your feet. No matter what path we choose, keep on circling the fracture or moon. All one people stand up and unite. Everything is sacred, everyone is sacred. We gotta rise up, oh, we gotta stand up tall. Don't let this world lock you out of your soul. We gotta rise up, oh, we gotta stand up tall. Don't let this world lock you out. When we look inside, yeah, we see this ember. We know this light inside is our love. When we look inside, yeah, we see this ember. We know this light inside is some child. We're imitating stars that move across the shimmer. We know this light inside is our love. When we look inside and polish the mirror, we know this light inside is our love. When we look inside, yeah, we see this ember. We know this light inside is our love. When we look inside, yeah, we see this ember. We know this light inside is some child. We're imitating stars that move across the shimmer. We know this light inside is our love. When we look inside and polish the mirror, we know this light inside, yeah. We gotta rise up, oh, we gotta stand up tall. Don't let this world lock you out of your soul. We gotta rise up, oh, we gotta stand up tall. Don't let this world lock you out. We gotta rise up, oh, we gotta stand up tall. Don't let this world lock you out of your soul. We gotta rise up, oh, we gotta stand up tall. Don't let this world lock you out. Don't let this world lock you out. Don't let this world lock you out.
I'm glad you guys are here with this. I am.
Of your heart.
No one is slicker.
I had a dream. We living in a perfect world. Everything is mainstream. Our reality becomes blurred. Don't lose hope, nah. Don't lose hope, nah, nah, nah. We can only hope for peace in this world, yeah. Dream of a perfect world. Dream of a perfect world. We can only hope for peace in this world, yeah. Dream of a perfect world. Dream of a perfect world.
No one is slicker.
Division at an all-time high. Police killing us like flies. All we want is some equal rights. But no, no, telling us they fear the black man. The world full of real racism. It's time to fight now. It's time to fight. Don't lose hope now. Don't lose hope. Nah, nah, nah. We can only hope for peace in this world, yeah.
No one is slicker. No one is slicker. No one is slicker.
Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge the land which I'm on, which is the traditional and ceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin people have lived on this land since time immemorial. We are grateful to have the opportunity to present on this territory. My name is Dahabo Ahmed Omer, and I'm the Executive Director of the BlackNorth Initiative. Welcome to our Allies event, which is the second in our three-part BlackNorth Ignites series. We have an incredible event in store for you today. And first, I would like to say that now, more than ever, we need to amplify the strength and solidarity of marginalized communities in the fight against systemic racism, where allyship is so critical to our joint success. Today, we are joined by our community partners and allies from the Jewish, Indigenous, Muslim, and Asian communities. But let's go back in time for a moment. 1 year ago, led by the Canadian Council of Business Leaders Against Anti-Black Systemic Racism, the BlackNorth Initiative was founded with the mission to end anti-Black systemic racism throughout all aspects of our lives by utilizing a business-first mindset. Leaders from close to 500 companies totaling $1.3 trillion in value are behind us. We believe that if corporate Canada can boldly take on the challenge to add gender diversity to Canadian boardrooms and executive suites by declaring policies, setting specific targets, and holding itself accountable, it can do the same work to create better representation for Black Canadians. The BlackNorth Ignite series is an opportunity to celebrate, reflect, look forward, and connect with our community to share some of our programs and initiatives at the BlackNorth Initiative. This is the beginning of a long journey ahead to end systemic racism and systemic anti-Black racism in our society. Today, we come together to celebrate Canadian Multiculturalism Day with leaders and allies from the Jewish, Indigenous, Muslim, and Asian communities, as well as leaders from our government. At this time, it is my great honor to welcome Elder Wabigoon. Elder Wabigoon, an Ojibwe elder, a member of the Lexeuil First Nation, and sits on the Loon clan born in Hudson, Ontario. She's also a keeper of sacred pipes, active community member, a speaker, a land defender, and a water protector. Elder Wabigoon is a 60s scoop survivor and was raised along the shores of the St. Lawrence River in Lake Ontario. Elder Wabigoon's desire to learn about her heritage prompted her to learn and follow her traditional ways. Welcome, Elder Wabigoon.
Elder Wabigoon, I'd like to offer you this tobacco in good intentions and prayer on behalf of the BlackNorth Initiative Allies event to lead us into our welcome.
Hey, hey, hey. Aki-oh, aki-oh, eh, aki-oh, aki-oh, eh, aki-oh. Hey, hey, hey. Aki-oh, aki-oh, eh, aki-oh, aki-oh, eh, aki-oh. Hey, hey, hey. Aki-oh, aki-oh, eh, aki-oh, aki-oh, eh, aki-oh. Hey, hey, hey. Aki-oh, aki-oh, eh, aki-oh, aki-oh, eh, aki-oh. Bonjour and the way Maganadog. Anin. Wabigoon Indigenous and Dunjaba Obishiko Laksua First Nation Mang Dodam. Hello and welcome all my relations. My name is Wabigoon, flower blooming in spring. I come from the Narrows, abundant with white pine, Obishikokang, Laksua First Nation, and sit with the Loon Clan. I have with me today my husband and helper, Carl Shea, knowledge keeper of the Eastern Door, Ilnu Nation, Lynx Clan. Ni Ben, it is summer. In our sacred circle, we sit in the southern direction with our sacred deer and cedar medicine, where everything is dancing and is alive. Our youth are on the land under our sixth moon of creation, Odeya Mini Gansis, the heartberry moon, and we say Miigwech. The land on which we stand upon, and from where I'm streaming this evening, is the land of the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Let us remember that the land that you stand upon today, from wherever you are, is the First Peoples' land. From time immemorial, our ancestors have walked this land, and they've hunted and they've trapped, harvested, and lived on this land known as Turtle Island. The next time you are walking on Mother Earth, touch her and say Miigwech. At this time, I would like to offer some tobacco to the bowl to say Miigwech for our sacred one, Mother Earth. And let's not forget those with whom we share the land with, the winged ones, the swimmers, the crawlers, the root nation, the plant nation, the tree nation, and the great antlered ones, the two-legged, the four-legged, and our grandfather stones. We say Miigwech to the sun, to Grandmother Moon, and to the Star Nation, and to the water that flows in our rivers and lakes. We say Miigwech, 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 Miigwech. Water was chosen for this welcoming ceremony so that we all may have access to this beautiful medicine today. And we will have the opportunity to say Miigwech to the water. This Mishkakinibe medicine water has medicine stones from the Bulkley and the Skeena rivers, where they meet at the Great Kisan in British Columbia. The cedar comes from trees that surround Gitchigami or Lake Superior. This water will clear a path that we all can journey upon today together, a path that will guide us to respect, love, courage, and humility. With the permission of Doreen Day and her grandson, Mash Kuntz, the words to the song I'm about to sing are, "Water, we love you, water, we thank you, and water, we respect you," the water song. I will ask those able to stand with me and face the eastern direction. As I sing, I will guide you to turn to your right and face the next direction. For those who need to remain seated, please close your eyes and see the directions in your mind's eye. Please stand. Niba Gija Gehiko Gimekwetchawe Nimigo Gishawe Nimigo. If you turn to your right and face the southern direction, Niba Gija Gehiko Gimekwetchawe Nimigo Gishawe Nimigo. You turn to your right and face the western direction, please. Niba Gija Gehiko Gimekwetchawe Nimigo Gishawe Nimigo. And to the northern direction, turn to your right. Niba Gija miigwech away ni migo. Gisha way ni migo. Let us remember the tranquility of silence, echoes of loons on the lake, and the great light that shines upon us from our grandmother, Heartberry Moon. Take a moment to appreciate the lingering smell of cedar as you roll it in your fingers, and then take the smell. Live the lesson of living in harmony as one with all living things on Mother Earth. I say miigwech as I honor those who came before me, and I say miigwech as I welcome you to the BlackNorth Ignites Our Ally. Apachigo chi miigwech bisandawieg. Thank you very much for listening, and welcome.
Thank you, Elder Abuabagoon, for that acknowledgement and for reminding us that we're all connected. I'm not sure where you were, but that area looks so serene that I wish I was there with you. It is now my honor to introduce our next guest speaker, Chris Leonard, who's an elder from the Black community and has always used ways from her ancestors into her work to raise awareness and support healing communities that are impacted by grief, loss, and trauma. Through purposeful practice, she works to support individuals and teams with unburdening and opening up their places of strength. Her process facilitation and trainings are grounded in holistic, transformative, and restorative approaches that strengthen individual and collective mental and emotional well-being. Chris also brings mindful awareness from her trainings as Zen Chiatsu therapist into her work of holding space for grounding and intentional processing. Welcome, Elder Leonard.
I would like to begin by thanking BlackNorth Initiative for inviting me here this afternoon. Today is a very special day for us as we stand arm in arm with our allies from the Muslim, Asian, Indigenous, Jewish, and Black communities to celebrate Canadian Multiculturalism Day. We all need allies in our lives. As the saying goes, no one is an island. BlackNorth Initiative believes in the importance of strength in diversity. A successful fight against anti-Black racism and discrimination is not possible without our allies. We must include everyone from diverse backgrounds. They each bring unique and valued perspectives that will contribute significantly to our common cause. Coming together as one and recognizing our similarities strengthens our humanity. Furthermore, our allies bring dynamic qualities that helps us garner our strength, motivating us in any cause or struggle we face. They offer us support, understanding, love, and compassion. My allies comes from all walks of life and brings the same qualities of love and understanding and compassion. I would also like to reiterate that the fight against anti-Black racism and discrimination will not succeed without our allies. Like I said in the beginning, no one is an island, and there is strength in diversity. This fight requires all hands on deck. Happy Canadian Multiculturalism Day.
Thank you, Elder Chris Leonard, for your powerful words. Our next guest speaker is Rabbi Friedman Cole, who's an elder from the Jewish community and will provide us with a traditional Jewish blessing. Welcome, Rabbi Friedman Cole.
I want to thank as well the BlackNorth Initiative for bringing us all together for a celebration of Canadian Multicultural Day. Anti-Semitism has been called the oldest hate. It's found in different faith traditions and in secular broadsides. Jews are criticized for being too clannish and too cosmopolitan, for being associated with capitalism and with communism, for being too white and not white enough. We've been buried in unmarked graves and burned to ashes in Europe. We've been part of the history of the Middle East, yet are also told that we don't belong in our Aboriginal homeland and should go to Europe. We thought that Jew hatred was declining, but have witnessed the recrudescence of anti-Semitism in the past years from both white nationalists and anti-colonial progressives. Hate is viral and it mutates. Because of our awareness and experience of hate, the Jewish community of Canada stands in sympathy and in solidarity with the Indigenous, Black, Muslim, and Asian communities that have experienced discrimination, verbal assaults, violent attacks, and killings. The Holy Scriptures, the Torah, the Gospels, the Quran, and Indigenous teachings all recognize that there are times of wandering in the wilderness when we feel uncertainty, anxiety, and under attack. When we're in that desert, we can and we must join together to listen to and to learn from one another, as well as to support and to strengthen each other. The BlackNorth Initiative is to be commended for bringing different voices together, because as allies, our solidarity gives strength to each other. We're pleased that the Government of Canada will convene summits on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and is dealing now with the deaths of Indigenous children whose unmarked graves are now being found. We call upon our government to adopt a broad-based plan to respond to hate, to move forwards on efforts to conciliate with Indigenous nations, and to combat anti-Black racism. We hope that the results of these efforts will promote healing for all of our communities and lead to the education and to legislation against hate. May the one who is all merciful, may the one who dwells in harmony grant peace, shalom, salam, wa niki winan to all of us below.
Thank you, Rabbi Cole. Your words of wisdom ring so true in these troubled times. And thank you also for your guidance. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our next guest speaker, the BlackNorth Initiative's chairman and founder, Wes Hall. Wes Hall is an established innovator, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and Canada's first Black dragon on Dragon's Den. An executive chairman and founder of Kingsdale Advisors, he has been repeatedly named one of Canada's most powerful people by the Globe and Mail, Canadian Business, Toronto Life, and Maclean's. Wes is also known for his generosity, leveraging his business success to benefit others with several impactful charitable initiatives. He's the founder and chairman of the Canadian Council of Business Leaders Against Anti-Black Systemic Racism and the BlackNorth Initiative, which is committed to the removal of anti-Black racism negatively impacting Black Canadians. Welcome, Wes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the BlackNorth Ignites Our Allies series. First, I'd like to acknowledge the land I am on, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, we're here to celebrate the Canadian Multicultural Day and amplify the strength and stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters from other marginalized groups. We're honored to have with us leaders from the Black, Jewish, Asian, and Muslim community. We also welcome the representatives from all levels of government who have joined us for this important dialogue. We're all fighting together against systemic racism. Today is a day for us to celebrate who we are, reflect on how far we have come as a country, but also to heighten the support systems necessary to build a more inclusive country. We need to emphasize and reinforce inter-community connections by working together to celebrate our differences while uniting in our shared values of equality, acceptance, and love for one another. There is strength in diversity, which is why we must act now. It is essential for us to honor the true meaning of multiculturalism in Canada by ensuring that all citizens can maintain their identities, take pride in their ancestry, and have a sense of belonging. We have been reminded recently that Canada is not immune to the realities of systemic racism, inequality, and racial injustice. Millions of Black Canadians and racialized Canadians live these realities every day. Recent events, such as the findings of a mass grave with remains of 215 children in a residential school in British Columbia, and the domestic terrorist attack on a Muslim family in London, Ontario, the rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Asian hate are all injustices that highlight the prevalence of inequalities in Canada, in our backyard. As we have seen all too often, lives are being lost every day, every week, every year. And we need policy and legislative change at the highest levels to create long-lasting positive change in our society. This must happen now, not tomorrow, or not next week, or next year. The detrimental impacts and repercussions throughout all marginalized communities in Canada must be addressed now. We welcome working with all levels of government to create real change for future generations. We all face struggles, from microaggressions, being left behind in the job market, to facing discrimination from those who are supposed to protect us. At the same time, we gain from our powerful histories and from the knowledge that our contributions have shaped the very fabric of this beautiful nation we call home. Let us remember the objective of this event is also to celebrate our contributions. We must continue to create awareness while amplifying the strength and solidarity of marginalized communities in the fight against systemic racism, where allyship is critical to our joint success. We need to keep working together. All of us, all of you, and standing in solidarity is one of the most important forms of visible action. And we must do more if we're to dismantle racist structures and oppressive systems. An inclusive society at all levels and in all spheres of life. Work, family, community is our shared vision. Some of you may be nodding your heads, knowing exactly what I'm talking about. Some of you may be wondering what you can do to help or how you can learn more. Here's what you can do today. Listen to our incredible lineup of speakers. Learn from their experiences. Share their stories. But most of all, get involved. And do not forget to tune into our next event in the BlackNorth Ignites series, our summit on July 20th, which will be a culmination of everything we have accomplished to date and the future of the BlackNorth Initiative. What we're doing together is not a blip on a radar screen. This is not a moment. This is a movement. We're not going back. Together, we can dismantle not only anti-Black systemic racism, but deeply rooted systemic racism and discrimination affecting all our communities. We will continue to stand and move in solidarity with our brothers and sisters from all marginalized communities. We will continue to do the necessary work to bring positive change to our society. We will stand up, step up, and show up. The time is now. Welcome to the BlackNorth Ignites Our Allies series.
Thank you, Wes, for an inspiring message, and we thank you for your leadership in this fight. Last week, an incredibly appalling and saddening discovery was made. The second, unmarked graves containing the remains of 751 adults and children were found at a cemetery near the Marieville Indian Residential School. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the Kawasis Nation and all Indigenous communities during this time of tremendous grief. We all need to take a moment and take stock as a nation. These deaths were not a mistake. These deaths were not an accident, and we can't afford to lose any more lives. To all of our allies, our community partners, our community members, and our dignitaries, thank you for joining us today. This year marks a particularly special milestone as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Canadian Multiculturalism Policy. I'm beyond honored to have incredible members of the Black, Jewish, Asian, and Muslim communities. A day marked to celebrate and to reflect upon the wealth of diversity that enriches our society. Canadian Multiculturalism Day was first celebrated on June 27, 2003. This day was designed as an opportunity to reflect on both the contributions of Canada's numerous cultural communities, but also the values that we all share: freedom, democracy, and individual rights. Our diversity has shaped our society and our way of life. People from around the world have come to Canada hoping to have the same opportunities and experiences as all other Canadians. And we all had a common goal: to achieve an inclusive, supportive, and diverse society in which everyone can thrive. Over the past few weeks and months, we have seen Canadian lived experiences with racism come to light. These events have reminded us that our country is not immune to the realities of systemic racism, inequality, and racial injustice. This day reminds us that a multicultural society is always a work in progress. It demands our effort, our attention, and our commitment. If we truly desire an inclusive Canada, each of us must speak up in solidarity with our fellow citizens who continue to live with racism and discrimination every single day. Let us continue to work hard at becoming a nation that values the richness and contributions of all members of its society. In Canada, diversity is our strength, and Multiculturalism Day is an opportunity to appreciate that we're strong, not despite of our differences, but because of them. To achieve a Canada where diversity is honored and recognized in all of its forms, we need each other. In recognition of the International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the BlackNorth Initiative and the joined together in a unity statement, one that calls upon all Canadians, all business leaders, all faith-based groups, and all community leaders, as well as our elected officials, to dedicate themselves to the elimination of racial discrimination. We came together then, and we're coming together again. Many communities answered our call to action and will be joining us today. Thank you to the National Council of Canadian Muslims, a prominent civil liberties and advocacy organization with many years of professional activism and public service. Thank you to JSpace Canada, which serves as a Canadian voice for progressive Jewish values. They advocate for social justice and peace in Canada and worldwide. Thank you to the Chinese Canadian National Council for Social Justice, an organization that educates, engages, and advocates for equity and justice for all in Canada. Thank you to the You Starts Foundation, a Montreal-run nonprofit organization serving a diversely linguistic and cultural youth population. Thank you to all the incredible leaders who have come together today to stand up, step up, and show up for each other. The reality is we need action. Today, we are calling on all levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal across the country to come together and convene an emergency national action summit on anti-Black racism and on hate. We're calling on the government to take immediate action on dismantling not only anti-Black systemic racism, but systemic racism and hate from our society. The term anti-Black racism was first expressed by Dr. Akua Benjamin, a Ryerson social work professor, a Black woman. It seeks to highlight the unique nature of systemic racism on Black Canadians and the history as well as the experiences of slavery and colonization of people of African descent in Canada. While Canadians often believe that our country is a model country when it comes to education, when it comes to inclusion, when it comes to equity, the hard truth is we have a long way to go towards achieving equity for the Black population, for the Indigenous population, for the Asian population, for the Jewish population, for all of us. Despite these challenges, there's a reason for optimism. Black communities and racialized communities in Canada are young and they're resilient. By acting now and removing these systemic barriers, we can work together to ensure that we have more of an equitable footing with all Canadians. We need leadership to drive a collective effort across Canadian society. There are many actions that we can take and that we must take to start to eliminate racism in Canada. We must drive a lasting change. It starts on an individual level, where we can encourage Canadians to speak up, identify inequities, commit to action, and become allies in the movement for change. Throughout today's event, you will hear from various communities who will not only share their experiences, but also talk about the importance of allyship. There should be no mistake. Racism kills, and we must have a legislative and policy-driven change to save lives. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Irwin Cotler. Professor Cotler has written upon and intervened in landmark Charter of Right cases in the areas of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, minority rights, peace law, and war crime justice. Professor Cotler is a founder and the chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, an emeritus professor at the University of McGill, the former Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, and a longtime member of Parliament, as well as an international human rights lawyer. Welcome, Professor Cotler.
I'm delighted to participate in this BlackNorth initiative and the launch of a Black-Jewish alliance to combat racism and hate. May I begin by congratulating Wes Hall for receiving a most deserved honorary doctorate and Dalbo for continuing inspirational leadership. As I was reflecting on this alliance, I had certain flashbacks which have underpinned not only my work, but my life, of being present at Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, and the words which still resonate with me when, as he put it, I look forward to a world where people will be judged not by the color of the skin, but the content of their character, of working in the Black ghetto of New Haven as a student and witnessing upfront racism against Blacks, of getting involved in the two great human rights struggles of the second half of the 20th century, the struggle for human rights in the former Soviet Union and the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, and being involved with the two political prisoners who represented the voice, the inspiration, the vision for those causes, Anatoly Sharansky in the former Soviet Union and Nelson Mandela in South Africa, and seeing the power of a Black-Jewish alliance in common cause. And this alliance is more necessary now than ever, because as we meet, we are experiencing a pandemic of racism, of systemic racism against Blacks and anti-Semitism against Jews, of the racist legacy of residential schools dramatized by the discovery of the remains of school children, by the murder of a London Muslim family reflective of the Islamophobia in our political culture, of rising hate against Asian Canadians, all of this reminding us of the importance of developing a constituency of conscience in common cause. And may I close with the words of Martin Luther King again, which have underpinned not only my work, but my life, when he said that injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. That must be our guiding credo. That must underpin the development of a constituency of conscience to combat racism and hate. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your experiences and the amazing work that you have done to champion human rights. Professor Kotler, we appreciate your time today. Next, we have a performance by Eli Kozak. Eli uses his musical talent to connect us in ways that sometimes words can't. Eli, take it away. Wow, Eli, what a beautiful song. Thank you. Our next guest speaker is Peter Flagel. Peter has had a prominent career as a social entrepreneur, fundraiser, columnist, community organizer, and musician. Peter has had a history of leadership roles within the government, NGO, and philanthropic sectors. He has worked in diversity and employment, as well as anti-Black racism, Indigenous issues, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, youth, and multiculturalism. He is currently the Executive Director of the Government of Canada's Anti-Racism Secretariat, a cornerstone of building a foundation for change, Canada's anti-racism strategy. He and his team are responsible for working with the federal government to identify and coordinate initiatives. They're also responsible to identify gaps and consider the impacts of new and existing policies, services, and programs on our communities and Indigenous people. Welcome, Peter.
Bonjour à tous. Je m'appelle Peter Flegel et je suis le directeur exécutif du Secrétariat fédéral de lutte contre le racisme. Je me joins à vous virtuellement aujourd'hui à partir d'Ottawa, sur les terres traditionnelles non cédées du peuple algonquin Anishinaabe. I would like to thank the BlackNorth Initiative for this invitation to join you all today in celebrating the BlackNorth Initiative's one-year anniversary. And I must commend Wes Hall and all the team at the BlackNorth Initiative for the extraordinary leadership you've displayed over the course of the last year. Through your actions, you successfully mobilized corporate Canada like never before to do more and to do better to combat systemic anti-Black racism as it manifests itself in the boardroom, in executive suites, and even at the entry level in the business sector. Standing on the shoulders of the countless freedom fighters and justice lovers who have preceded us, you have helped bring renewed and invigorated impetus to the struggle for racial equity, economic justice, and fairer opportunities for peoples of African descent, Indigenous peoples, and racialized communities across Canada. And for that, you are to be commended, for these are trying times for our nation. It was just 1 month ago that we learned with broken hearts of the discovery of a burial site with 215 Indigenous children on the grounds of the former Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia. It was just over a month ago that we saw an explosion in anti-Semitism, targeting neighborhoods, businesses, and religious centers, which brought fear to Jewish communities across Canada. It was just 3 weeks ago that we learned with sheer horror of the terror attack perpetrated against a Muslim family in London, Ontario, which killed 4 family members and left 1 innocent child seriously injured. And it was just this month that we learned with deep concern of the escalation and violent assaults perpetrated against Black Muslim women in Edmonton, Alberta. So the truth can no longer be denied. Anti-Indigenous racism is real. Anti-Black racism is real. Anti-Asian racism is real. Islamophobia is real. And anti-Semitism is real. Et elles prennent des formes structurelles au sein de nos institutions, y compris nos institutions publiques. Alors oui, le racisme systémique est bien et bel réel aujourd'hui. And that is why today's gathering is just so important. By bringing members of Indigenous peoples, Black communities, Asian communities, Muslim communities, and Jewish communities together, you are demonstrating that it is possible to tear down the barriers that divide, and that it is possible to build solidarity across our differences, and that it is possible to recognize the extent to which the lives of far too many Canadians are being undermined by the scourge of racism. Because now is the time to do whatever it takes to turn institutional racism into a thing of the past. At the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat, we are committed to continue working with you and thousands of organizations, grassroots and otherwise, to drive a whole-of-government approach to combating systemic racism in Canada. This means working to ensure that an anti-racism lens is applied to significant government decisions before they are ratified. This entails creating alignment and catalyzing new responsive initiatives with government departments, whether related to COVID-19, criminal justice reform, economic empowerment, or health equity. And it involves working with our counterparts across government to institute a full-blown anti-racism framework to be applied to all business lines across the federal public service. Mais nous ne pouvons pas accomplir ce travail sans vous et des organisations comme le vôtre à travers le pays. That is why we make sure to center the voices of communities and peoples with lived experience of racism. And we do this by convening town halls, forums, and conferences with over 10,000 Canadians to better understand where the systemic barriers are. So these are not town halls for the sake of conversation. No, These are town halls to understand where the gaps are, to understand the impact of government decisions. All this to be able to work more effectively within government, but also with key sectors of society, like the corporate sector, to catalyze new, responsive, and sustainable initiatives against systemic racism. We acknowledge that there are still so many things to do. There's so much work to be done. That is why we seek to continue working with all of you. And we want to do this because we see it as being critical to seeing the government of Canada better serve the needs of Indigenous peoples, as well as Black, Asian, Muslim, Jewish, racialized, and religious minority communities across Canada. So I invite you to visit the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat's website on a regular basis for news, reports, funding opportunities, and opportunities for collaboration. So once again, please allow me to congratulate the BlackNorth Initiative for your extraordinary achievement this past year and for more successes in the years to come in our collective effort to end systemic anti-Black racism and all forms of racism in Canada. Happy anniversary. Joyeux anniversaire.
Thank you, Peter. We're looking forward to seeing the outcome of your work with the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat, and we encourage our audience to check the website for updates. Our next guest speaker is Greg Fergus, who is a member of Parliament for Hull Elmer. Greg serves as a parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister, to the President of the Treasury Board, as well as to the Minister of Digital Government. In the House of Commons, but also as a citizen, Greg is very involved with the Black community, to which he has always shown an unwavering commitment. In particular, he is the chair of the Black Caucus in the Parliament of Canada, an institution that is very important to him. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, BlackNorth Initiative, for having me here today on Multiculturalism Day. I'm really happy to join you as Member of Parliament for Hull Elmer, but also as chair of the Parliamentary Black Caucus. Look, it's so important for us to turn our solidarity into visible action. When we take these actions, it's important for us to do so for two reasons. The first, I think it shows the outside community, the non-Black community, the importance of how Black Canadians see what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve, and for them to develop a different narrative about Black Canadians. But more importantly, I think it's to show ourselves as a community that we can take action when we work together, that we don't have to be isolated. We're not crabs in the bucket. We don't need to be jealous for other people's successes. We are all helping each other. When my sister and brother do well, at one time I'm there to support them. And when I need some support, my sisters and brothers will be there to help me as well. So I think that's why it's so key. And that leads me into talking about why it's important for us to raise our profile and to share, making sure that we can have, that we talk about the challenges that our communities faces and how they're similar to other communities. I often like to say, as chair of Parliamentary Black Caucus, is that when you start disaggregating the data and you start seeing what different racialized groups and the effects that they have or how policies affect them differently, you'll almost always discover that Black Canadians are almost underrepresented in the things that we want to be overrepresented in and overrepresented in the things that we are underrepresented in. But there's always other communities that are facing similar challenges, if not worse, Indigenous peoples, other intersectionalities, other peoples of color. We need to work together. We need to support each other if we're going to challenge white supremacy and if we're going to make sure that we create a Canada where everybody is valued for what they can contribute. And this brings me to, I guess, the last point which I'd like to make, and I think which is the importance of the BlackNorth Initiative and other initiatives across the country, is that we have made a call to action. We have signaled that we want to make changes, that we want to create a Canada where everybody is equal, and that we need to fight hate, we need to fight anti-Black racism, we need to fight white supremacy, and we need to create a Canada where all are equal. I think when we all work together, we can really achieve a lot.
Thank you, Greg, for your inspiring words. Your commitment to equality is commendable. Our next speaker is Jay Rosenzweig. Jay is on the board of directors of the BlackNorth Initiative. He's also the board chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights and the founding partner of the Rosenzweig and Company. Jay is an expert in designing, building, and attracting world-class teams. He consults with public and private companies, including large global corporations, emerging growth to mid-sized businesses, professional service firms, and private equity and venture capital firms. Prior to joining the search industry, Jay was in the field of law. Welcome, Jay.
Good afternoon. My name is Jay Rosenzweig. As we celebrate the first anniversary of the BlackNorth Initiative, we're also coming up on the 500th anniversary of John Donne's famous notion that no person is an island. The metaphysical poet's phrase points to the fact that no one is truly self-sufficient. Everyone must rely on the company and comfort of others in order to thrive and survive. I would say no minority community, Jewish, Black, Asian, Indigenous, Muslim, LGBTQ2S+, is an island either. Today we are recognizing our allies in the struggle for true and lasting equality and dignity. As a board member of the BlackNorth Initiative and the board chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, I am truly proud to be alongside Wes Hall and his team, working to stamp out all forms of hate. We've joined forces to fight against systemic racism, against anti-Semitism, against Islamophobia, and crimes and discrimination, both new and old, against Indigenous peoples and the Asian community. Recent events here in Canada and around the world have demonstrated the need for all people of goodwill to band together in common cause. And that common cause is the promotion of tolerance, empathy, and understanding. We've learned and experienced so much heartbreak lately. The London murders of an innocent Muslim family, the discovery of even more evidence of atrocities committed against Indigenous peoples, the rise in anti-Asian hate this past year, and we've seen an alarming spike in anti-Semitism and hatred aimed at Jews. As a proud member of the Jewish community, let me say that we cannot let anti-Semitism creep into the mainstream. For the first time since the Holocaust, we are indeed seeing the mainstreaming of anti-Semitism in Canada and around the world. Online taunts, hate-laced language, and a rise in physical attacks against Jews puts us in the danger zone. No longer veiled, this anti-Semitism is openly espoused by too many educators, journalists, religious figures, and other influencers. This is a hatred based on untruths and fueled by social media epithets, tropes, and rants. And there are dangerous signs that as this blight slithers around our country, anti-Semitic slurs and untruths will find a home in the cracks of Canada's multiculturalism and society. This simply cannot be tolerated. We need to hear more voices of support for the Jewish community and the eradication of anti-Semitism. My community knows all too well what can happen if citizens remain silent in the face of intolerance. The organization where I serve as board chair, the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, is concerned for the human rights of all individuals, be they Uyghurs in China, the Rohingya people of Myanmar, political prisoners around the world, or those who are discriminated against in Canada. If left unchecked, anti-Semitism, systemic racism, and all forms of hate will shred the social fabric of Canadian life. If we're divided, racism and hate will continue to grow and fester. But if our communities bind together to understand and to comprehend and to replace quick judgment with grace and understanding and humility, then we will prevail and achieve our common goal. The time is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Your expertise in building and leading teams is invaluable. We are glad to have you on the BlackNorth Initiatives board. Our next guest speaker is Dr. Afua Cooper. Dr. Cooper is a Dalhousie University professor and an expert in Black Canadian and African diaspora history. She is also the research director for a Black People's History of Canada project. Dr. Cooper led the panel that investigated Dalhousie's relationship to slavery, race, and anti-Black racism. She's also the principal author of the subsequent report. An accomplished poet, Dr. Cooper is also the winner of the Portia White Prize and the J.M. Abraham Atlantic Poetry Award. Welcome, Dr. Cooper.
Hello, my name is Dr. Afua Cooper. I'm a professor at Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia. Black Canadians have always engaged in action to bring about a better life for themselves and for others. I think of the 1940s and the 1950s civil rights activism of people like Hugh Burnett and the National Unity Association. And this came out of Dresden, Ontario, and the region around Dresden, Ontario. The NUA fought against racial segregation, and their endeavors led to the province of Ontario rolling out the Fair Employment Practices Act of 1951 and the Fair Accommodations Practices Act of 1954. The work of the NUA publicized the issue of racial discrimination across Canada, and these pieces of civil rights legislation that were eventually enacted led the way for a better life for all Ontarians and all Canadians. And, you know, this happened in Saskatchewan, it happened in Nova Scotia, it happened in Alberta. The work and activism of people like Viola Desmond in Nova Scotia led to similar pieces of civil rights legislation. We think of the work of the sleeping car porters, the Black men who worked on the trains across Canada. And they were porters, but they were also civil rights activists. And their work and their agitation for in fighting anti-Black racism led to legislation, again, that impacted created a better life for everyone in Canada. We think of the work of folks like Dudley Laws and the Black Action Defense Committee in the 2000s, and certainly in the 1990s. BADSI opened up spaces and gave a voice to all racialized communities, especially with regards to policing issues. And today it's Black people, especially the youths, the Black Lives Matter, who are marching and challenging the various types of anti-Black racism. These youths are putting their lives on the line, and they're opening up spaces for everyone. Other examples of severe anti-Black racism in this country. In 2021, StatsCan published its 2019 hate crime report. And in this report, it showed that Black people, as a racialized group, are the targeted or the preferred group for hate crimes to be committed against them. In the Blackness Project in Canada, led by Dr. Lauren Foster of your university, we are made aware that 91% of Black Canadians noted that racism is a problem in their communities, and that 70% of Black Canadians, this is the highest number, indicated that they face racism on a daily basis. Black people are 20 times more likely than any other group to be killed by police officers, especially Black men, and 6 times more likely to be taken down by a police dog. 42% of children in custodial care in Toronto are Black, though Blacks make up only 8% of the Toronto population. In the past 2 decades, incarceration of Black inmates in federal prisons have increased by 70%, though Blacks make up only 8% of the increased by 70%, though Blacks make up less than 3% of the national Canadian population. And Black Canadians now represent the fastest growing group in federal prisons and are vastly overrepresented behind bars, says a news magazine called The Torontoist. In terms of chronic diseases, hypertension, diabetes, certain forms of cancers, these rates are highest for the Black community. Infection rates in the COVID-19 pandemic and mortality rates are the highest in the Black community. The high school dropout rates are the highest in the Black community. What does this mean in the context of multiculturalism? Black people are living lives of insecurity, and these statistics are alarming. We are experiencing a national crisis. These statistics tell us that the condition of Black life in Canada is a national disgrace. And so why is it, in spite of the numerous reports detailing anti-Black racism and anti-Black hate, that we do not have a national summit on these issues? So I'm calling on the federal government to have a national summit on these issues if Black people are to be seen as, citizens equal of all the rights that other citizens in Canada enjoy. Look, in 2014, the United Nations declared the International Decade for People of African Descent. Canada recognized this decade 4 years later in 2018, and so far has done nothing to recognize the decade. In 2017, the United Nations Working Group came to Canada and ended their report. They toured Canada and they interviewed many people across this country, and they noted that anti-Black racism is deeply embedded within Canadian institutions at every level and is manifested in policies and practices that negatively affect the quality of life and life opportunities for African Canadians. And the UN report notes that Black people are among Canada's poorest, as their poverty rate is, and I quote the UN 2017 report, is more than 3 times the average for whites. And so I'm calling on the government in this moment of multiculturalism, in this day. This is Multiculturalism Day. From the government's own documents, we're told that multiculturalism is a cornerstone of Canada's constitution. Theoretically, within this multicultural frame, all racial, ethnic, and religious groups are, and I quote, equal before and under the law and have the right to the equal protection and benefit of the law without discrimination, unquote. Yet Canada's history of slavery has been swept under the rug. Its anti-Black racism continues to be denied, and African Canadians remain second-class citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your passionate words, Dr. Cooper. Your knowledge and appreciation for history is insightful, and it gives us a deeper understanding of this critical historical context for where we are today. Speaking next, we have Mustafa Farouk, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. A lawyer by trade, Mustafa completed his Juris Doctorate at the University of Alberta in Osgoode Hall and later earned his Master's of Laws from the University of California at Berkeley. He is a published writer and a commentator on the news and publications on issues relating to Canadian Muslims, human rights, and civil liberties, as well as public policy issues such as Islamophobia and national security. Welcome, Mustafa.
My name is Mustafa Farouk, and I am the CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. I wanted to begin by first sincerely thanking the BlackNorth Initiative for inviting us and honoring us to come and speak here as allies. I think the question of allyship is a question that Canadians have been thinking about for a long time. It's a question that I, as a Canadian Muslim, think about every day. How do we, those of us who may not be part of the Black community, but who want to be good allies, how do we be good allies in standing up against anti-Black racism? This is an especially important question to me because so many of our constituents, as part of the Canadian Muslim communities and part of the beautiful milieu of our country, are Black and Muslim. And indeed, gender, race, and religion play an important role in the intersections of the way that Islamophobic violence is manifested in this country. Just yesterday, I was speaking to a person in Edmonton who was one of many Black Muslim women who was violently attacked in the last year. And we've seen this pattern of Black Muslim women wearing hijab attacked in Edmonton and in Calgary and in other places in Alberta. And unfortunately, this is not just an Alberta problem. The intersections of anti-Black racism and other forms of systemic barriers like Islamophobia continues to play an existential threat to Canadians as a whole. And that's why I think that the work that's being done at the BlackNorth Initiative is so critical in helping us to understand and unpack the work of what it means to be a good ally, of what it means to come together, of what it means to stand for something positive and to work towards solutions, even as we must engage in substantive critique of existing dangerous and problematic institutions. I think that one of the ways that I think we can understand what it means to be a good ally is what it means to be a good friend. I'll say that the executive director of BlackNorth Initiative is someone I consider to be a friend. And I know she's someone who's a friend to so many. Her leadership and the leadership of so many others at BlackNorth Initiative, but also in many other organizations that are standing up against anti-Black racism and many forms of discrimination and xenophobia, is so critical to teaching all of us, those of us who are trying to be good allies, what we can do to stand up. And we have to be really clear here. It's about more than just our words. It's about more than just donations. It's about real action. And it's about supporting communities as they stand for real action. It's part of why I'm joining the call that's being made for a national action summit on anti-Black racism. It's incredibly important, even as we've called for a national action summit on Islamophobia, it's incredibly important that we actually have a national action summit on anti-Black racism. Politicians and those who have made promises about what they can do, those who are standing up across the country to say that they want to do more to stand up against anti-Black racism, have to timetable change. We actually have to see that level of systemic change come. And I think that has to be followed by a larger conversation, a larger summit around hate in general, because I think these intersections are so critically important for us to understand. And so I think now more than ever, it's the time to come together. Thank you for inviting me to come together.
Thank you, Mustafa, for those passionate words. They truly highlight the importance of allyship and a call to action for all of us. Our next guest speaker is Dr. Henry Yu. Dr. Yu received his undergraduate degree from the University of British Columbia and his master's and PhD from Princeton. Currently, he is the director of the Initiative of Student Teaching and Research on Chinese Canadians, the principal of St. John's College at University of British Columbia, as well as a board member of the Chinese Canadian Historical Society of British Columbia. Welcome, Dr. Yu.
I wanted to thank BlackNorth Initiatives for inviting me to share my story. My name's Henry Yu. I'm a historian, and I was born and raised in Vancouver, and that's where I'm joining you from, which is the unceded traditional ancestral territory of Musqueam, the Hunkaminam speaking peoples. And I'm on the campus of University of British Columbia where I teach. And, for me, this last year has been really difficult because of hearing from my students, from family, from relatives, from my community about the impact of anti-Asian hate, of people afraid to go out, the changing where they go, when they go, even shopping, looking over your shoulder because you're afraid someone might shove you or yell, at you or spit on you. That anti-Asian hate, to me, is not something new. it's actually something that's been there right from the founding of Canada, that Canada is built on racism. When I hear that racism is not us, it's not Canadian, well, actually, I hate to say it, but it is us. It is Canada. And until we deal with that, until we deal with the fact that anti-Asian racism and anti-Muslim hate and what the horrific murder of a family in London, Ontario, or the horrific discovery of the 215 remains of Indigenous children who never returned home to their family and communities, that is actually us. That, in a sense, the racisms that each of us feel, the anti-Black racism that so many of our communities have to face in every day of their lives, that is the norm. And one of the difficult things in Canada is the denial of that racism, of the idea that we are not that when you suffer racism, when you hear about how your grandmother is afraid to go shopping for food, when you hear that your mother's worried every time you go out at night that you may never return, when you hear from family members about who've invested in success, who've tried to belong, who've tried to do everything, they've stopped speaking, home languages, they've learned English without an accent, they've tried all these kind of ways to belong, and yet you don't belong, and you still aren't one of us in terms of Canada. That, to me, is the pain that so many of our communities are facing, and it's a pain that comes from the elephant in the room that we don't discuss, that actually this country is founded around white supremacy, and the racism we all feel are just different legs of the same elephant, that they're being crushed. Our communities are being crushed under different legs, but really it's the same elephant. And so for me, the important thing as a historian, as a Canadian who has children being raised here and wanting a future for them that's free of fear, free of having to be Asian in this country and suffering anti-Asian racism, is not to just deal with anti-Asian racism, but to work together, to work in alliance with all the others who are suffering under that same elephant crushing all of us. And so we have to come together. A national summit that will deal with this problem, a national summit on anti-hate, and how we can all deal not with just the leg of the elephant that's crushing us, but get rid of the elephant that's in the room. So please come together and let's finish off this elephant. Let's get rid of the elephant that's crushing us.
Thank you for sharing your life experiences, Dr. Yu. You've helped to open our eyes to a new perspective and remind us that we are stronger, not despite our differences, but because of them. Next up is an incredibly talented performance by Ascension Harjo. Ascension is a hoop dancer and will captivate you all with their creativity. Ascension, take it away.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Adrian Harjo. I'm from the Kickapoo and Seminole Nations of Oklahoma, and it is my pleasure to speak about the hoop dance. Now, the hoop dance comes to us from our brothers and sisters in the southwest of the United States, and in its original form, it was actually a healing dance. Now, many of the 500 different nations that encompass Turtle Island, aka North America, they have taken this dance and adopted it and put several different meanings behind it. One of those meanings that First Nations put behind it was the message of unity. That's why we use that sacred circle. And when you really think about it, almost everything in nature is that of a circle. The seasons go in a cycle. The sun, the moon, the stars, even birds build their nest in that very sacred circle. And even when you get technical about it, wind in its most powerful form is that of a giant circle as well. We call those tornadoes. Now, as you watch this dance, you're going to see different shapes and symbols contained within nature: birds, bees, butterflies, there's a cowboy, snake, there's an eagle. All of these things are basically related. That is the central message here with unity. Each and every one of these hoops represents a different person, a different thing, a different country in the world. All of these things coming together, and when this young man holds that sphere or that ball of hoops over his head at the very end, that represents unity among all nations and all people and all living things. So as you watch this, you will see these different shapes. Use your imaginations, and if you recognize any of the shapes wherever you are, please feel free to shout that out really loud. So let me introduce you to the young man that's going to be doing this. He is also my son. His name is Ascension Harjo. He's 18 years old, from the Mohawk, Kickapoo, and Seminole Nations of the Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. He is also the 2018 Teen Division World Champion Hoop Dancer, so you're going to be seeing one of the best. Now, as he does this hoop, like I said, of wherever you guys are, if you want to say the names of these different shapes out, please feel free to do that, and I hope you enjoy this dance. This is the Hoop Dance.
Thank you, Ascension, for your performance. This has been an incredible session thus far. We are far from done. Our next segment will bring together incredible leaders from diverse communities who will share their lived experiences, their challenges, but how we can collectively work together towards a common goal. But first, I'd like to introduce to you all Mahuli Chai, who will be leading our mini fireside chats with extraordinary leaders who are standing in solidarity. Mahuli, over to you.
Thank you, Dahabo, for that warm welcome. Welcome to BlackNorth Ignites, our Allies Fireside Chat. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our panelists. Amy Go is the president of the Chinese-Canadian National Council for Social Justice. The council educates, engages, and advocates for social justice and equality for all in Canada. Collaborating with partner organizations, the council has led the social media campaign to stop the spread of racism. They also launched the Face Race campaign and have developed anti-racism educational tools for children and parents. Amy's a trained social worker serving immigrants and seniors and racialized communities. Amy Go, thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's so good to speak to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Tell me, what does multiculturalism mean to you?
Unfortunately, it really means an attempt by Canadian government to hide to give a facade that there's racial harmony, that we are all living, side by side, recognizing the different cultures in Canada. However, it really hides the real truth, the ugly truth, which is racism, which is systemic racism historically, and also, of course, the impact of the disparities experienced by racialized communities such as Black and Asians, and of course our Indigenous communities, because of colonization and racism. So unfortunately, I don't have good association with the word multiculturalism.
Yeah. Well, so what are the benefits of expanding people's worldview to acknowledge that you would say other people's cultures? Why is that important?
I think acknowledging, of course, everybody's culture is important. Yeah. But I think more important is that we also need to recognize in the world and in Canada in particular that there are this hierarchy and there are disparities, that unfortunately not all cultures and not racial groups and not ethnicity enjoying the same rights, enjoying the same benefits this great country is offering. And I think that is important, to have that worldview of an analysis of anti-oppression, anti-racism is important.
Tell us a little bit about the Stop the Spread of Racism campaign. How did this get started, and how would you say for yourself Canadians can really be involved with this initiative?
So Chinese Canadian National Council came out to speak up against anti-Asian racism late January 2020, when there was one case of COVID in Canada, because we knew that something bad is going to happen. There was already stigmatization and targeting of Asian Canadians, in particular Chinese. So we were very fortunate that there is an ad company called Hive that came to us because they saw us speaking up against anti-Asian racism and wanting to do something. And so they created this, logo as well as the video. And then we took that and advanced that and promoted that through social media. We were very lucky to have award-winning, director Winnie Zhang from Korean Canadian community that linked us with all these celebrities and artists and actors across the country to speak up against racism, to warn, to actually rally Canadians to stop the spread of racism, which is a parallel pandemic that is already happening.
Absolutely, yeah. So how would you say this campaign is obviously doing good things to try to bring people together? What would you say are the best ways for allies to really come together to, help or aid with the Asian community?
So we appreciate all the ally support. We call out Asian Canadians to actually examine our own biases and our discrimination, our stereotypes, and we call our allies to do exactly the same thing. That that if there are any opportunities to educate ourselves, we all should, right? In terms of the history of oppression and racism in Canada against Blacks, against Indigenous, against Asians, we all should educate ourselves, and we all should then take the privilege and position that wherever we are, to advance racial justice, to combat racism, and to speak up and to support those that are being affected by racism.
Amy Go, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Really appreciate this.
Stephanie Allen is the Associate Vice President, Strategic Business Operations and Performance at BC Housing. Stephanie is an award-winning housing development specialist focused on building affordable, equitable communities. Her master's research focused on settlement and displacement of Black communities and documented the work done in Vancouver to seek redress for the displacement of Hogan's Alley. She also serves on the City of Vancouver's Poverty Action Advocacy Committee and is on the board for the Community Impact Real Estate Society in Vancouver. Stephanie Allen, so good to have you join us here in studio today. How are you?
I'm well, thank you for having me.
Tell me, what does multiculturalism mean to you?
You know, multiculturalism was a step on Canada's journey towards inclusion, and the intention to recognize that there were more than just people of Anglo descent living on the lands that have become Canada. And so it was a space for people to express themselves and be themselves. And I think a really important move along Canada's journey.
And tell me about the benefits of expanding people's worldview to include other cultures and maybe why that is important.
Well, I think it's important because it erodes the myth that there are some cultures that are superior to other cultures and some that are inferior. When we see the robust life, tradition, belief practices, spirituality, economic practices, ways of organizing ourselves, ways of organizing our homes, our communities, it really does bolster a sense that we all have something to contribute. We all have value, and that it's not only for some people to have value in our society.
And that being the case, what are some of the ways that you would suggest that multiculturalism can be implemented?
I think it's time for multiculturalism to really take its journey on the road. You know, we've got to become committed to liberation from all forms of discrimination towards a fully equitable society. We've got to truly normalize differences and not make them, exotic or making them so much of an other, but just that there are different people with different ways of being in the world, and that all of them have value. All of these communities that have come to contribute to the building of this country, especially recognizing the Indigenous peoples on whose lands we live.
Right. I mean, so well said. How would you address displacement, how that's adversely affecting the Black community in Canada? And perhaps what are some of your recommendations in that area?
Well, Canada's had a long and sometimes hidden history of displacing Black neighborhoods.
Right.
We know a lot about Black Wall Street, but not everybody knows about Africville or Hogan's Alley or Little Burgundy or Amberville.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many places where Black people fleeing and seeking refuge came and set up community. And the displacement of these communities has cut off Black community development in all forms: economic, cultural, political, social. The redressing of this displacement, and there's a lot of government bodies who have responsibility here, requires a real coordinated approach to look at all of those aspects and then seeking ways to redress, to bring justice forward in ways that Black communities can have the spaces that allow us to thrive while also contributing all of our assets, all of our skills and our talents to the greater Canadian mosaic.
So well said. Why is land ownership so essential to building wealth in Canada?
Well, it's interesting because the deprivation of home ownership for Black people in Canada has had a lasting impact over the full duration that this nation has been put together. When we see Hogan's Alley, Africville, Little Burgundy, Amber Valley, these were Black settlements right across Canada, people fleeing racial violence, seeking refuge, and they set up communities and places for themselves to live. But through pressure, through unwantedness, through restrictive land covenants and discriminatory policies, right up until urban renewal that the Canadian government enacted across Canada, the displacement of Black communities has had this lasting impact. And so when we think about land and home ownership, we recognize that we are still operating on unceded territories and the lands of Indigenous peoples, and that so many of our family members are living at or below the poverty line. And so to close this gap is going to take a lot of effort. And that's why I think it's time for us to expand our understandings, look at models such as community land trusts, cooperatives, other ways of shared capital and shared equity, so that we can really lift as we all climb. Many of us have homes, many of us have great places to live, but still too many of our community members do not. So I think when we think about how essential it is to create these models that leverage our existing systems, but really make sure that no one's left behind.
Stephanie Allen, it was indeed a pleasure speaking to you. I hope you have a pleasant day.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Alika Itelk is from the Kanakuk Nugabi in the Tikukani region of Nunavut and was born and raised in a strong Inuit community where Inuit culture, language, and traditions are very much alive and celebrated. Through her lived experience and family ties, she has a deep understanding and connection, a respect to Indigenous ways of being. Currently, Alika is finishing an honors degree in law, human rights, and social justice with a minor in Indigenous studies at Carleton University. Alika is also an advocate and activist for human rights and ensures that all creation is being protected and respected, including the lands, waters, and animals. Hi, Alika. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Let me ask you this. What does multiculturalism mean to you?
I think multiculturalism is everywhere, and I think it's the beauty of who makes us as individuals and also as a collective. I think it is strength and beautiful diversity, exactly how we have been created to be.
And tell me about the benefits of expanding people's worldview to include the knowledge of other cultures, ethnic backgrounds. What is the benefit of that?
I think the benefit of it is expanding one's own growth. A lot of people seem to have this big issue that we're all different, and we are, and it is so important to start accepting and acknowledging all of our differences and histories and language and the environments in which we come from, to better accept and to better live across these lands together.
And what are some of the ways you believe we can implement multiculturalism?
I think one of the main ways we can do it is through educating each other and being open and accepting that we are all different, and educating ourselves in where this individual or these group of people, where they come from and what their realities are, what their truths are. That is so important. It is so important to look at all of our beautifulness of each other, you know? And I think it would benefit the entire world in looking at and accepting all of our different beautiful everywhere.
That's so wonderful to say. Let me ask you, how can allies support the Indigenous community in the wake of the recent heartbreaking discoveries, if you will, in British Columbia and Saskatchewan?
First, I think it's really important to acknowledge that these are not discoveries in our communities. These are things that we have been saying for a decade, and it's finally being accepted because the evidence is there. I think allies can very much support us and learn from all of this by educating themselves on the true history of how Canada came to be and accepting that we can make a better tomorrow for Canada if we just start working together and start accepting each other's truths and each other's experiences. Because this isn't a historic issue, this is an ongoing issue for all Canadians, whether Canadians notice it or not.
And my last question to you is, what is your hope for the future?
My hope is that my children and everybody's children aren't scared to walk the street or feel ashamed in who they are, because we are all beautiful and our ancestors have worked very hard to get us where we are today, to live here today together. It is so important to me that one day, that in the future, really soon, that love will be more given instead of the hate and the discrimination that a lot of people are facing right now. So ultimately, my hope is that everybody will start being who they are, who we are meant to be and to do as human beings, and that is to love. It's a language that we can all speak, and it is something that we all understand and can give out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Karen Mock is a human rights consultant, psychologist, and educator. She's also the president of J-Space Canada. Karen is a past president of Canadian Friends of HIFA University and an active founding member of the Equity Summit Group of the Anti-Racist Multicultural Educational Network, the Canadian Association of Jews and Muslims, and the Canadian Arab Jewish Leadership Dialogue Heart to Heart. Karen is a recipient of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal and was recently named to the Order of Canada for her promotion of human rights and interfaith advocacy. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Karen. It's good to speak with you. Give me an idea and tell me, what does multiculturalism mean to you?
Well, thank you for having me. To me, multiculturalism means one of the most important policies that Canada has. And as a matter of fact, it's something that Canada is very well known for. We're approaching the 50th anniversary. The policy was declared on the floor of the House of Commons by Pierre Elliott Trudeau in October of 1971. And at that time, it was under the umbrella of multiculturalism that we were able to do our human rights work, our anti-racism work,
right,
and to bring people together. Yes, at one point it was called Celebrating Our Differences, but people who really understand the actual policy and the law, which was enshrined in law in 1988, know that it includes issues of equity and equality and access to everything that this country has to offer, so everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. It doesn't mean people doing their own thing. It's got a bad rap by some, but really what it's about is standing together as good Canadians with equality and social justice for all.
Got that. What are the benefits about expanding people's worldview when it comes to knowledge of other cultures? What would you say that is?
Well, given that we are a multicultural country, it's so important to know your neighbors. And it doesn't mean, by the way, I used to hear people say, oh, well, we don't have any people of color in our schools, so we don't have to do anti-racism. That's more important. When we don't have Jewish people, or we don't have Muslim people, or we don't have Indigenous people in our classrooms, it's even more important that we know the culture and the history of everyone who makes up Canada. I was appalled that people didn't know the history of residential schools in this country, for example. And we shouldn't need activists. We shouldn't need that people should only stand up for their own. We need to have allies and stand up for each other in a multicultural country. Our work is about putting ourselves in the other's shoes. And unless you know other people's lived experience and their own narratives and what their contribution has been to Canada, then we really are doing ourselves a disservice.
Dr. Karen, tell me a little bit about J Space and some of your hopes for the future really quickly. And then you're finished. You're done with us today.
Well, in general, my hopes for the future is that we will in fact implement our policies of multiculturalism and anti-racism and human rights and social justice. That's where the flaw is. And why did we create J-Space 10 years ago? It was because we needed to show, as in any community, there are multiple voices. It isn't just one organization, organizations that they call mainstream that have the voice. There are diverse representations. We said that we were wanting to counter the very far left in our community and the far right in our community. We stand for pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, and pro-peace. And when I say that, it's because we want people to understand the range in the Jewish community. We want people to understand what anti-Semitism is and what it isn't, and that legitimate criticism of policies of any country, the same as we can criticize policies in Canada, we can criticize policies, but not the whole country or not the whole people, or not cross the line into becoming anti-Semitic because they don't like a specific policy of the Jewish state. So we want our programs, we provide a lot of educational programs. You can see our social media contacts along the bottom. You can sign up on our mailing list. And my hope for the future is that people of my generation who remember when the policies in this country of human rights and multiculturalism were enacted, my hope is that we can pass the torch on to the next generation. Our strongest groups in your community and my community are the next generation leadership that are going to take this over and understand it can't be done in sound bites. It's got to be done by building relationships in order that we can be allies in the fight against anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, anti-Asian racism, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism.
Dr. Karen, good to see you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, and all the best.
Malik Shaid is an accomplished media personality and entrepreneur who has interviewed the likes of Kanye West, Pink, Beyonce, Eminem, 50 Cent, Jay-Z, and many more. He's a former Music Plus VJ and has also worked at CTV, CJAD Radio, and with Bell Media. Currently, Malik is the Director of Operations of Youth Stars Foundation, a youth-focused organization whose philosophy is training through play. They offer a stimulating environment for children, promoting healthy living habits through multi-sports, financial literacy, coding, the arts, science-based activities. Hey, Malik, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me a little bit about what multiculturalism means to you.
To me, it means different cultures, different races living in society. And I think Canada is a great example of what we call multiculturalism.
Awesome. And what would you say are the benefits really for people to expand their worldview and knowledge of other cultures?
I think it's being open-minded and educating themselves on other culture struggles and history. And by doing that, it will definitely break the challenges that we're presently having in our society.
And what do you believe are some of the ways we can implement multiculturalism?
I think interculturalism is more important than multiculturalism. I think interculturalism promotes dialogue and interaction between cultures. And I think that's the key to understanding different cultures and their struggles.
And what would you say is the essential way for Canadian youth to join to fight against racism and how can they join the fight? Like, how can they make sure that their voices are the ones that are heard?
I think as adults, we have to give kids an opportunity to speak on behalf of themselves. And I think the education system is a key component of this. I feel that we lack history knowledge about Indigenous culture, Asian culture, Black culture, and other cultures who have contributed to Canadian society.
Malik, tell us a little bit about Youth Stars and the work that you're doing there. You're doing phenomenal work, I hear.
Yeah, presently we have a Black History Tour that goes across Quebec, and we promote Black Canadian and Black Quebec contributions. And the beauty about it, we don't talk about entertainment or sports. We really talk about other things that we've contributed to society.
Oh, that's so good. Listen, Malik, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. It's good to hear about your organization.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mahuli, and to all of our featured speakers today. Thank you for your knowledge, your guidance, your insight, and sometimes even a pinch of humor. I see a bright future being made possible through these dark discussions. Throughout this day, you have exhibited humility, grace, and kindness. We are part of one human race, and we must let our humanity be our driving force. We look forward to continuing to work together to stand up, step up, and show up for each other. Thank you to all of our participants who joined us today, and we look forward to seeing you on July 20th for our final BlackNorth Ignites event, our summit. Take good care, everyone.